Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hi guys, and welcome back to Bouncing Back, where we talk all things personal resilience. I'm your host, Joanna, and today we're going to be talking about nutrition and the role it plays in impacting how we feel and behave, but importantly, how we can harness good eating habits to boost our mood. So to help us unpack this, I'm joined by Dillon, and Penny is a counsellor and clinical nutritionist and helps clients further enhance their mental health, energy levels, and sleep, just to mention a few. Hi Penny, how are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you today, Johanna?
I'm great. Thank you for joining us here and coming into the studio.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Before we get into everything, would you like to tell us a bit about who you are and what it is you do?
So I'm Penny Dillon. I'm a clinical nutritionist and I'm a counsellor, and I do wear lots of different hats. So sometimes I'm a volunteer at Lifeline, so once a fortnight to be specific, and I also teach mental health first aid when I'm not counselling people or providing nutrition support. And I also do a lot of wellbeing presentations as well. So wellbeing and kind of stress and resilience, that sort of stuff. So I do wear lots of different hats, but I love that. I love that my work is so kind of varied and cool. And on a more personal note, I have 3 teenage boys. And I've got a foodie husband, which is very lucky because I'm not the best cook myself, despite being a nutritionist. And I have a staffy who I absolutely adore. So she's 4 years old.
That's beautiful. And I know you're from Sydney,
Yes.
So would you like to tell us what you're doing in Melbourne?
Over the weekend, I was doing a workshop. So I got in on Thursday night and so I've been here for 4 days now in beautiful Melbourne. So thank you for having me in your lovely city.
No, we're really grateful to have you here. How are you finding the weather? We had a chat about that
actually
before.
Warmer than I anticipated. I've kind of figured out like how to dress now, not too many layers. You just put your big jacket on and then you take it off because it's warm inside.
Yeah, it's honestly so random. The weather here, it drives me insane sometimes, but we love it.
Yeah, I didn't expect to be a little bit overheating down here.
Yeah, like normally when I step out the house, I'm like, this is nice. And then it gets really cold. And then I'm like, I put every layer possible on. And then I get inside. I'm like, oh, it's so hot. So you can never be too prepared for the weather here.
I've got this big jacket that is like super, super cushy and it feels like putting a doona on.
Oh, I love that.
It's so nice. And like even like the pockets are lined with what's it called?
Fleecy kind of stuff.
Fleecy kind of line. And so I put my hands in the pockets like, oh, it's so nice and warm.
Yeah, winter hasn't been as bad as I thought it would be. But yeah, let's jump into non-weather related topics. So we're going to get into a section we like to call Have You Met Penny? So we're just going to get to know a bit more about you with some questions. So I'd love to start off with asking you what your favourite book is or if you've got one.
I have just finished a couple months ago Lessons in Chemistry.
Oh.
Have you read that?
Definitely not because it has the word chemistry in it, but tell me about that.
No, well, I mean, I guess that was probably what puts a lot of people off, but I've absolutely loved it. It was about a woman in the 60s who probably should have been born in like our era, and she just won't tolerate the fact that as a woman she isn't given the same opportunities as men, and she's a chemist.
Wow.
So she's definitely in a very male-dominated profession. She's a little bit odd. She's a little bit out there. She's got the cutest, coolest dog, which I think everybody loves as well. And so, I've just absolutely love that. So that was beautiful. And I listened to it on audiobook actually.
Yeah.
And, you know, audiobooks can be hit and miss, but it was a really good audiobook.
Amazing. So a bit of a Marie Curie style book.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll give it a go because it is about science. But you know what? I'll add it to my list.
It's mostly about relationships and
Okay.
life and like a woman in a man's world, as opposed to not a lot of chemistry stuff in there.
I think I can get around it then. I will add that to my list. Beautiful. So movies. Are you a movie buff?
I do like to watch a movie, and I'd like to say something really highbrow like, Shawshank, which I do love. But I'm a huge fan of The Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah. So fun.
Yeah, so
I love that.
I've been watching it for, I don't want to show my age, but a long, long time, more than 20 years. And it was on recently at the Opera House with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and I didn't go, and I'm like, damn it. So I will definitely do that next time it's in town, because I think that'd be really awesome.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's a classic. I love that movie. Our next one is about podcasts. We're on one at the moment. Do you listen to any? Yes,
I do. I tend to listen to podcasts a little bit more for fun.
Okay.
And then audiobooks might be fun, or it might be for sort of more learning and enriching my mind. But I do love true crimes and cocktails.
Do tell. I love true crime podcasts.
They'll just pick usually it's a murder of somebody or the death of somebody, and then they'll go into and sometimes there's a group of people, and then they'll go into like everything behind it. So like they did Marilyn Monroe. So it's very very cool.
That's so interesting. Have you heard of Red Handed, the podcast?
No.
So another really good one. It's done by 2 British women, and they are hilarious, and it really unravels like every part of the story, and it's so interesting.
Yeah,
highly
awesome.
recommend it.
Okay, so what's it called again?
Red Handed.
Okay. That's a good name.
It is good. Yeah. What's the one you listen to?
It was called True Crimes and Cocktails, and it's 2 ladies, they're cousins.
Yeah.
And one of them's from a show on TV called Superstore.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. And she's hilarious, and obviously they sit there and they drink their cocktails and they go on so many tangents, which is absolutely hilarious. But then they call it and they're like, oh my God, I'm going down a tangent again. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love when
sidebar.
Yeah. I feel like when podcasts have like a bit of a fun twist, it's always more enjoyable. And next one is famous role model. It's a bit of a tricky question, I know, but it could be even just someone in your life that you find inspirational.
My mum.
Oh, beautiful. Don't worry. That was my answer when I got asked this question too.
So yeah, she's in her late 70s. I hope she doesn't mind me saying that. And I mean my dad as well, but I think, my mum's still working by choice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so just because she loves it, and that's what she chooses to do with her time, and she's got a really cool job. So she works in tourism. Yeah, so
beautiful.
I'll call her and I'll be like, where are you? And she's like, oh, I'm just at Ayers Rock. Or I'm just in like Port Douglas, or I'm in like King Island or somewhere like that. Yeah.
So she gets to travel around a lot.
Yeah, she gets to travel around a lot. And like her clients say like, why are you still working? And she's like, why wouldn't I? Look where I am. Oh, isn't this amazing?
I would do that forever if I could.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. So, but also she's, always willing, like if she knows that I need her, then, she's always there on the phone or ready to come over, or, she's amazing.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Let's get into our interview questions.
Excellent.
So my first one for you is, why do you think resilience is important in our life?
Ooh. So I'm going to need you to ask that question again. I've just had a completely mental blank.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
So why do you think resilience is important in our life?
Well, resilience really helps us deal with what we call the normal stresses of life. So when I say normal stresses of life, it's like being interviewed on a podcast or, for some people, doing a presentation, moving house, starting a new job.
Yeah.
So resilience is about being able to deal with those normal stresses and cope with them, and also to kind of be able to stay within our window of tolerance. So if I describe window of tolerance, if you kind of think about like 2 parallel horizontal bars, the area between those 2 bars is our window of tolerance. And for some people, it's really narrow, and for some people, it's really big. And we'll talk probably a little bit more about that later. And so resilience is our ability to stay within that window of tolerance and cope with those normal everyday stresses.
Interesting. And I know a lot of people think that being resilient can mean also being immune to stresses and adversity in life. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. It's completely normal to feel stressed on occasion. So if you've got a deadline, for instance, a little bit of stress is healthy because there's a little bit of stress that makes us go, oh, I better get up my ass and write that assignment or write that paper or do that boring piece of work or whatever it might be. So a little bit of stress is actually really motivating.
Yeah.
So we need stress in our life. So it's kind of unrealistic, and to think that no stress is kind of the utopia, because that stress is actually kind of what helps us get stuff done.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like it's a part of growing up as well. I feel like if you have no stress, there's something that has to be going wrong there if you have no stress. I feel like it's just so normal to be stressed out and have stress.
Yeah. And you see it, I guess, like I've got teenage boys, and so you see stress manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah.
But, if I'm thinking of perhaps one of my children, he's pretty chill, he's pretty cruisy. And so, he's pretty last minute when it comes to getting assignments and stuff done, because, that stress doesn't kick in until the last minute.
Yeah.
And so for other people, I'm the type of person who likes to get stuff done really early and quickly so that that stress then resolves, because I don't like it sitting over me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And I feel like sometimes people use stress in different ways. Like some people like to leave things till the last minute because that stress motivates them and forces them to get things done. And some people like to avoid the further culmination of stress, so they get things done early.
Yep.
So it's a very versatile thing, but totally normal.
Yeah, exactly. Stress is totally normal, and it's totally not only totally normal, but it's totally necessary for us.
Yes, I think that's a very good distinction to make. Amazing. So let's jump into our topic for today. So how would you define malnutrition or, nutritional deficiency?
So malnutrition is a pretty broad diagnosis. It refers to lots of things. So if we break down the word, mal means bad. And the other part of the word, nutria, is the Latin word for feed. So it's, I guess, bad feeding when we really, really break it down. And so malnutrition can be being underweight, can be being overweight. It can mean that we're not accessing the nutrients in the food that we're eating. So it can mean lots of different things. And nutritional deficiency is, I guess, a subset of malnutrition. So nutritional deficiency is when we're not eating the right foods to feed our body with what it needs to function properly.
Yeah.
Or our body can't access those foods because of our gut function or because of other things that are going on in our life, whatever it might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with malnutrition, does things like eating disorders and body dysmorphia, does that fall under the category of malnutrition as well?
Well, body dysmorphia is more of an emotional issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and so then I guess the output is malnutrition.
Okay.
Yeah. So and that's kind of where the whole food and mood sort of, it's so fantastic to be able to marry them up together. And to be able to talk about the psychology behind food.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions when it comes to food and the impact it has on our mood?
What do you mean by that?
So sometimes there are some little myths here and there about like how food can impact us or our mood. Are there anything around
There's
that?
a lot of fads out there,
Yeah.
like superfoods. Like, what's the latest superfood? And the reality is, like, superfood is just a marketing term.
Yeah.
To say buy more blueberries or buy more of this product that I've made.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the myths around. And also, I guess the big myth is that there's one, like, what one food should I eat? You know, as a
Yeah.
nutritionist, people go like, what's the one food that I should eat? And it's like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
your body is made up of, like, trillions of cells. So like, there's no one food that you can eat. It's actually, it's a wide variety of foods in a balanced way.
Yeah.
And it's not only what you eat, it's sort of how you eat and when you eat.
Okay.
And sometimes also why you eat.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie, I was going to ask you, so what's the one food I should be eating? And then you just said that, so I'm not going to ask you that question now.
Banana, because they're tasty.
Yes, fair enough. We love
Although some people hate them.
No, they're a good snack. I need to be better at eating fruit more, but that's a whole other thing. We won't get into that. And so what do you think the role of personal resilience is when it comes to coping with malnutrition?
Well, there's definitely a link between poor mental health and diet. So in that, if we've got poor diet, we're probably, it's potentially going to have an impact on our mental health, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But also, if we've got poor mental health, it makes it harder to make good nutrition choices. Like we tend to reach for. So if our resilience isn't great and therefore our mental health is perhaps not great, we tend to reach for comfort food.
Yeah.
So it might be some, I call them some carby carbs or some chippy chips or, and we all do it. I do it sometimes. The other day, somebody said, what do you want for dinner? And I said, I want chips. I've had a crappy day. I want chips. And I was like, okay, no, I won't have chips.
Yeah.
So we tend to make these food choices with things that aren't necessarily going to support and nurture our mental health. And so then, we eat those carby carbs and chippy chips. So cakes and pastries and, comfort food. And then that kind of compounds the problem. And also the thing about eating foods like that is that they actually feed the bad bacteria in the gut.
Okay.
And those bad bacteria have they have a very strong voice in our body.
Yeah.
And they're like, feed me. Like, that was good. Like, I'm going to grow some more. So can you feed me some more?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the more we eat foods like that, the more they're calling out and asking, hello, over here, feed me. Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes in those moments where we are like, oh, not feeling the best, maybe I'll just have this little easy, like unhealthy option. And then we tell ourselves, this is the last time I'll do it. Next time I'm not going to reach for it. I'll reach for something healthy. And then we keep doing that and it forms this cycle.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I'm a big believer in everything in moderation. Like, if you want to have a little bit of, have a couple of pieces of dark chocolate after dinner at night and you can stick to 2 pieces, like, good on you.
Yeah.
It's actually full of magnesium and antioxidants and it's yummy as well. And there's a bit of sugar in there. But I'm not kind of like a hardcore, like, no sugar. Everything has to be organic. Like, I'm quite realistic. I have 3 teenage boys. I have to be in a household full of 3 teenage boys. And I feel like I'm digressing from the question now, but yes, we do tend to create habits.
Yeah.
And those are habits that are really hard to break. And that's why actually we're better off in trying to replace them than break them.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to fall into those habits and it's quite hard to fall out of them. And one of the reasons is that when we talk about something like sugar in particular, it lights up the rewards receptors of the brain like you would not believe. It's it's believed to be something like 8 times more addictive than cocaine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it is very, very powerful stuff. And don't get me wrong, like, I eat a little bit of sugar, but I'm always conscious of the impact that it has on my body, and also that it's very addictive. So, and it's not always realistic to avoid it, but being conscious that it is very addictive, and being mindful of what happens. And the other thing is, if you've ever read, or I don't know if you've heard of the book, Why French Women Don't Get Fat.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so it's an old book, but it's quite an interesting book around the mindset of, like, when you eat a piece of, like, chocolate, for example, that first piece tastes really good, like those reward receptors in the brain, like it's actually dopamine that gets released. They light up like, ooh, I feel good, I feel rewarded, I feel motivated, I feel fantastic.
Yeah.
And so we get that dopamine release and we think, oh, that was really good, I want to feel that way again. So then we eat another piece. But the way that receptors work is they kind of upgrade and they downgrade. So that second hit that we get is not quite as good as the first hit. And so then the body goes, oh, I really want to feel the way I did that first time, so I'll eat another one.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, you've eaten a whole block of chocolate.
Yeah.
So again, just being kind of mindful, if you're going to, have a little bit of chocolate after dinner or whenever it might be, like eating it mindfully, eating it slowly, kind of knowing, like, even understanding that process can help you go, well, I've had my 2 pieces now and that's all I need, and I'm just going to enjoy what I've had, and that's enough.
Yeah, I feel like I totally can relate to that sense of excitement that comes along when you're like eating something you know you shouldn't be eating. But like, I like to do this thing where I've had like a good week of eating and then I'll treat myself at the end of the week. And when I have that like first bite of, you know, ice cream, big ice cream lover, I'll be like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so excited right now. But then it like slowly dwindles and I'm like, oh, I kind of feel bad that I'm eating this. Is that like a normal reaction to feel like guilt after eating a certain food?
It depends on your relationship with food, but also, you know, it does have a sort of change on our brain. So that, you know, that sugar is like a very kind of short-term, like light up the brain kind of effect, and then it wears off and then we kind of come down and we don't feel so good about ourselves. So there's sort of a chemical thing that's happening behind the scenes there.
Yeah. So it is a bit like an addiction sometimes.
Yeah.
Wow. And how would you say that what we eat relates to our food? I mean, our mood, sorry. Yeah. Let me repeat that one. That did not make sense.
Absolute huge impact on what we eat and our mood. So when I talk about this sort of stuff, I like to talk about 4 key neurotransmitters, and we would have heard of some of them. So we've just talked about dopamine. So dopamine is our reward hormone. So it's released like when we eat a piece of chocolate. For some people, it's when they take a certain drug.
Yeah.
And also, but it's also released when we complete a task. So like somebody's written a whole book on like why you should make your bed in the morning. There's a whole lot of science behind that, because you've completed your like first task for the day. You've been up for like 2 minutes, you've made the bed, you've completed your first task. You've had a dopamine hit, a dopamine release. So you're now motivated to go on to do other tasks in your day. However, we can't make dopamine without having the right inputs.
Yeah.
And so like zinc and B6 are really kind of important for most of our neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
So dopamine's a really important one. You can boost it other ways, like by listening to music and, you know, cuddling your dog. There's lots of different ways to boost it. But at the end of the day, you still need that B6 and zinc and some other ingredients to make that, to make your dopamine. The second one is serotonin. That's our happy hormone. That's what makes us smile. I can see you're smiling at the moment.
Yeah.
That's serotonin. That's serotonin working its magic. And so a lot of antidepressants are actually designed to keep the serotonin that we have, like to make it work harder and make it work longer.
Okay.
So serotonin is hugely important. It's actually really important for kind of like titrating anger and like managing anger. So somebody who is angry a lot, like, you know, working on ways to boost their serotonin can actually be really effective. Then we've got oxytocin, which is, you know, you've probably heard of it as the hormone, like the breastfeeding hormone and the childbirth hormone. It's actually the hormone that makes us feel connected to other people. So me holding eye contact with you right now is releasing oxytocin. So it helps us form a connection with anybody, and it's released by, you know, all genders. So it's not just a female thing. And so that's really important for feeling connected to other people. And so, again, we need the right ingredients for that. And then the final one, which a lot of people haven't heard of, is GABA. GABA.
Oh,
yeah. So
interesting.
GABA is I like to call it our handbrake or our inhibitory hormone. And so it's the thing that's dialing stuff back. So if you imagine you go into a really stressful situation and your stress response is being activated, and so you're releasing cortisol, you're releasing adrenaline, your heart rate is increasing, your breathing rate is increasing, you know, you maybe you're starting to sweat, you're starting to feel uncomfortable. GABA is the hormone that counteracts all of that and brings everything down.
Okay.
So in like a child that has ADHD, we might see like not enough GABA, which is why they're kind of like can tend to be sort of up all the time.
Yeah.
So like giving them the right foods that are high in GABA, or L-theanine, which the body turns into GABA, can be really effective. So it's one that I'll probably talk about a little bit, like because GABA is it's often the one that we're lacking in.
Yeah. And what other like nutritional or like lifestyle factors would contribute to like having better mood and resilience?
Okay. So I guess there's lots of little, like having really healthy relationships, you know, like people don't, they often don't give enough credit to relationships, but nurturing healthy relationships and social relationships. So not just your relationship with your partner or your kids or whatever, but those important relationships in our lives is actually the single biggest determinant of overall health. not just mental health, but overall health.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is so hugely important, which is why we see like older people and they're lonely. Like it's so damaging to their health is because they're suffering from not having that human connection, not having those interactions.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different things we can do to improve our resilience. So, like obvious things like making sure we've got a appropriate work-life balance. But when we are feeling stressed, there's lots of little things that we can do, like breathing. I mean, we talk about breathing and it kind of seems really obvious, but there's quite a specific way that we want to be breathing to trigger the right things in our body. So the research is kind of saying that it's about 6 breaths per minute.
Okay.
Yeah, so a breathing, breathing in and breathing out cycle about 10 seconds. Doesn't have to be exact, don't overthink it, but that's kind of about how fast you want to be or slowly you want to be breathing to bring your stress levels down. And when you breathe in, you actually want it to be a pretty full breath. Like you want to feel your lungs kind of really fill up because we have like kind of receptors, like stretch receptors. And so when these receptors get activated, when the lungs are really, really full, the science is kind of saying that it's actually telling the rest of the body, or the rest of the body actually wants to fall in line with that breathing. So if you're slowing down your breathing and you're having that big breath and you're kind of triggering those receptors, then the heart rate goes, oh, I want to fall in line with the breathing. I want to slow down.
Yeah.
Same with the blood pressure, same with the brain waves. So it's actually a really powerful thing. And then just to make it more complicated, ideally we want our out breath to be longer than our in-breath, because every time we breathe in, our heart rate increases a little bit. And every time we breathe out, it decreases a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's quite a specific type of breathing, but, even just breathing slowly, like if that's all you do, like that's good.
Yeah, and when you were talking about breathing, I noticed myself like hyperfixate on my own breathing.
Yes.
I was like, I can't breathe right now. But I have noticed that like a lot of people talk about breathing techniques as like a good way to move through things. I personally think of that and I'm like, oh, does it actually work?
Yeah.
But you have to really give it a go for it to sort of have an impact.
And I'm a huge believer in find what works for you. So like for some people, like meditation, they're like, I just can't do it. Like there's too many thoughts in my head. They're like, that doesn't work for me. You're telling me to switch my thoughts off. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So for them, a visualization might be better, or whatever it might be. I love the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique as well. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've heard of it, but I don't know exactly what it involves.
I actually used it yesterday. There was somebody who was like really annoying me. And I was like, I'm just going to go into the bathroom and I'm just going to use this technique. And by the time I'd done it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm back. I'm present again. So the idea is that when we're feeling anxious, our thoughts are kind of like outside of our head, like up above our head. They're all kind of up here and they're kind of a bit out of control, and we're not really kind of, centered in our body. We're not. And so what we do is we name 5 things that we can see. So I can see my computer, my thumb, the microphone, you, and the glass. And then 4 things that I can feel. So I can feel my headphones, I can feel my clothes on my body, I can feel my fingers touching each other, and I can feel my shoes. And then we name 3 things that we can hear. So I can hear your voice and I can hear my voice, and there's some sort of little background noise somewhere that I can hear. Then we name 2 things that we can smell. So I can definitely smell the lovely coffee that I just had. And maybe there's like a perfume or something in the room, which is really lovely. And then 1 thing I can taste, which is my coffee.
Yeah.
So now I'm back into my body.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've kind of I've brought myself away from all of those feelings or thoughts that are perhaps like running a little bit rampant, like that person was really annoying, and now I'm back in my body.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a way to switch off the thoughts, I guess, and like
sort of
come back.
Yeah, and come back. And what I love about it is, for people who perhaps work in an office, like you don't want to be like lying down on the ground and doing meditation. Like it's like, what are you doing? Like it's kind of really obvious. But something like that, and also the breathing, it's just like you can literally just kind of sit at your computer screen. You can even turn your computer screen off and just kind of sit there and go, I'm just going to do this right in this moment. You can do it in a meeting. You think, oh, this meeting's really annoying me. It's really ticking me off. Is like just take a minute to do that and center yourself.
Amazing. I love that technique. I have actually I've tried doing something like that before, and it's really great actually. It makes you more aware of your surroundings, but also aware of the fact that you can step away from that situation that you're in.
Yeah.
So that's a really great one. Do you have any specific like nutritional strategies that people could use if they're dealing with like stress or anxiety or depression?
Yeah, so staying away from the sugar is a really good idea. And the thing about nutrition is it's, for the most part, it's longer term, but there are supplements that you can take that are really good for like in the moment. So I guess we'll talk about long term first and then maybe come back to short term. And please remind me if I forget.
No, we will.
So the research says that like again and again and again, there's so much research behind the Mediterranean diet being really good for so many things, you know, cardiovascular health, longevity, and it's now like sort of fairly clear that it's also very good for mental health.
Yeah.
So, and it's part of really what's in that is it's an anti-inflammatory diet. So there's not, you know, sugar doesn't really feature in it. You know, I think it's a couple of pieces of fruit a day, lots and lots of vegetables and legumes and what have you, but also not a lot of red meat. So red meat maybe once a month.
Yeah.
Just I'll put a caveat on that. Like everybody has different needs. So I'm talking about the Mediterranean diet, but like a growing teenage girl or boy is going to need more iron than that, especially if they're in puberty, especially if they're doing a lot of exercise. You know, women in general need more iron than that. So just, you know, everything with a grain of salt because people have very specific needs. But the Mediterranean diet again and again has come out as being really fantastic for our overall health, including our mental health. So minimal red meat, kind of once a month. Red meat is quite inflammatory. Iron itself is actually quite inflammatory. So we want enough, but we really don't want too much in our body.
Yeah.
Protein is like a lot of fish, a lot of seafood, a little bit of chicken, like, you know, chicken or poultry might be maybe once a week, but the, you know, the featured proteins are like nuts and seeds and you know, sort of animals from the ocean.
Yeah.
As it were. So as an overall diet, that's a great one to go by. And then lots of fantastic things like olive oil. We don't necessarily want to be heating olive oil up to a high temperature because it loses all its goodness.
Okay.
Yeah, so much better off cooking with something like coconut oil. And you can buy that in a liquid form now from the supermarket, which I love.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah, so because when we heat up oils, particularly vegetable oils and very particularly things like canola and sunflower and safflower oil, that they actually become very inflammatory in our body.
Okay.
Yeah, even not in that state. So things like canola and safflower oil are sort of higher in omega-6s, but the omegas that we really want in our bodies that are great for our mental health are omega-3s.
Okay, yeah.
So omega-3s is like oily fish.
Yeah.
Salmon, which I'm very, unfortunately, quite allergic to.
Oh, no.
I know, it's very, very sad. But things like salmon and then all the oily fishes, which my dad loves, which is maybe why he's still so switched on in his late 70s, but things like mackerel and sardines and herrings and, which don't float everybody's boat, I'm conscious of, but they're very high in omega-3s. But and the omega-3 we get from animal products is actually more bioavailable to the body than the omega-3s that we get from plant-based foods. That's not to say that it's not doable, but you've just got to be mindful if you are plant-based to be making sure that you're getting enough of your omega-3s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's things like flax seeds, linseeds, some people call them, and even chia seeds.
Okay.
And walnuts are really good as well for things like omega-3.
Yeah, amazing. And how does someone go about integrating these new changes into their diet? Like, obviously, you can't go from 0 to 10 and be so great at doing all of this. So how do you recommend integrating it?
It's a really great question because if we think about how the brain works, the brain doesn't like change. So if we go back to kind of like, you know, cave person time, change was a threat, you know, like a really big climate change or, you know, a big change in the environment was a massive threat. So we're instinctively hardwired to fear change and to react to change, which is, you know, if somebody thinks there's going to be a change in their relationship status or their job or whatever, like the response is fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what we now know is that if the change is less than 10%, the brain doesn't really notice.
Yeah.
So we can quietly Like, make these little changes slowly but surely, and then the brain doesn't freak out.
Okay.
So that's really important. So if you are making changes, like if somebody came into my clinic and said, I want a complete diet overhaul, I'd be like, whoa, slow down, because I know what's going to happen is they're going to do it for 2 weeks. And then they're going to, as I say, throw their toys out of the cot, which is what I would do.
Yeah.
And go, this is all too hard. I'm not doing it. I'm going to go back to eating the way that I ate before. So it depends on the individual, but I might say, okay, after dinner you're having ice cream, as you mentioned. And so like step one would be to replace, so not take away, but replace, because it's easier to replace a habit than remove a habit, replace that with a nice piece of fruit. And not like a boring piece of fruit. Like if you're not really inspired by pears, don't replace it with pears.
Yeah.
My son loves pears, but so like replace it with like some like really yummy strawberries or blueberries or something that, still feels like a treat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So start by doing things like that. Or like the next thing might be, what am I eating for lunch? I'm having fish and chips. Okay, well, this week it's going to be, I'm going to switch the deep fried fish out for grilled fish.
Okay.
And then down the track, maybe another week later, you can swap out the chips for salad. And you'll get to the point where you really kind of start craving that food.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for some people, there's a lot of easy fixes, like it's not perceived as a change. Like if I say to somebody, look, you're having a lot of dairy. Dairy is also unfortunately inflammatory. It's also not great for a lot of women if they've got any kind of hormonal issues, skin issues, perimenopause, menopause, anything like that. I'll be like, okay, well, can you swap out your normal coffee for an almond milk coffee? They're like, sure, I can do that. The brain doesn't even see that as a change.
Yeah.
So like finding those low-hanging fruits can be really good as well. So easy, quick fixes that aren't sort of hard or threatening.
Yeah, so slowly but surely you'll get there, and it's about reinforcing good habits, but that'll take time, obviously.
Yeah, and replacing bad habits with good habits as opposed to stopping bad habits.
Okay, amazing. And I know we mentioned the short term before, but we were going to come back to that. Are you happy to talk about that one now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's probably some more things I can talk about on the long term as well, like eating a diet that is like a very wide variety of foods. I know that sounds really basic, but like we don't want to be eating just bananas every day.
Yeah.
Like have a couple pieces of fruit, try and make sure that they're different colours.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's like phytonutrients in those colours. So even like a green apple versus a red apple, like there's different nutrients in there. There's different chemical messengers in there that do fantastic things in our body. So, like each day, like don't overthink it. But, when you serve up your dinner plate, is there something, red, green and orange, for example?
Yeah.
So don't just have all green or all red. So a wide variety of foods. And people say, what's the best nut? Again, like mix them up.
Yeah.
Like macadamias. Have a different nutritional sort of profile to like Brazil nuts that are very high in selenium, so they're good for our thyroid.
Yeah.
Also our sperm health, if you're a guy. And then, like as I mentioned before, so walnuts are really high in omega-3s. So like they all have almonds really high in calcium. So, yeah. So always mixing it up.
Okay.
Yeah, and not just kind of going every day I eat the same thing, because you're probably depriving yourself like unintentionally of really good nutrients. Try and eat, something from the sea each day. That can be hard.
Yeah.
Yep, because that's got iodine, which again is really good for our thyroid.
Yeah.
The thyroid's important for mental health because it's actually what kind of is a very strong link between the thyroid and the brain and the gut.
Yeah.
And then things that feed our gut health.
Okay.
So fermented foods.
Yeah.
It's okay if you don't like sauerkraut. You can go to the supermarket and buy some kefir.
Okay.
It's not as good as making it yourself, but I'm kind of a firm believer in making it accessible to people. Because if I say to you, like, go and make your own kefir, you'll be like, are you serious? Like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
It's all right. You can go to the supermarket and buy it. It's, it'll still feed the good bacteria in your gut.
Yeah.
So fermented foods. Kombucha is another good one.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, kombucha. And some people are actually really good at making that themselves.
Yeah.
But then also fiber-rich foods that feed those good bacteria. So there's actually as many bacteria in our body, in our gut, as there are like cells in our body. So we're literally half bug. And we have like a symbiotic relationship with them. Like it's this kind of two-way relationship. We need them, they need us. Like without those bugs, without that bacteria, we can't digest our food. Like they actually support the production of neurotransmitters. So without that good bacteria, we can't make our serotonin, we can't make our dopamine. So one of the ways we feed them is fiber.
Yeah.
So fiber-rich foods. So that is, again, like fruits and vegetables and whole grains, but particularly fruits and vegetables. Yeah. So not orange juice, but like an orange smoothie. Like, so you keep the whole fruit rather than extracting the juice because the fiber is actually in the whole fruit.
Okay. Yeah. So substituting is another great way to go about it. Amazing. And that's something that can be done in the short term too?
Yeah. So I guess when we're talking about short term, if you're about to go into a meeting and you're feeling really stressed, then like something that you could do in the short term is like take some magnesium.
Okay.
Yeah. So magnesium's used for over 300 enzyme reactions in the body. It's super, super important. It's a really common deficiency. And the interesting thing about magnesium is that for every molecule of sugar we eat, we need 250 molecules of magnesium to process it.
Okay.
We also need magnesium for things like muscle relaxation, which is why, you know, if you're feeling stressed, like you might be feeling really tense. So there's like that magnesium is deficient.
Yeah.
It's also really good at calming the nervous system. So it's a great one to take before bed. It doesn't make you sleepy, but it calms the nervous system. So if you're lying in bed at night in particular and your brain's going, that magnesium will help to calm the mind and can really nicely send you off to sleep. And so it's quite hard for the body to digest those kind of, you know, supermarket chemist big magnesium tablets.
Yeah, I was going to say, they come in like interesting forms.
Yes.
Yeah.
So powder is really is a great way to go. And there's some really sort of good tasting powders out there. I know a lot of people much prefer tablets. But magnesium's probably one of the few ones where I'd go, like, that is much better as a powder. And so if you've got a presentation and you're, you know, crapping yourself, having, you know, 400 milligrams of magnesium right beforehand can really calm you down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that like a sure fix or is everyone going to be different?
Everybody's different. So it depends on what your deficiency is. But it would be my go-to. Like it would be the first thing that I would try. I wouldn't try it for the first time directly before a presentation because for some people, certain types of magnesium can make their bowels a little bit loose.
Okay.
So
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, try it at home first just to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
And again, that depends on the individual and it can be really hard to know. So, you know, we always try to test these things out for so for my clients, I might even like let them try it in a consultation. How's that for you? Okay, you like the taste of that? Okay, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Then we can go away and give that a real red hot try.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So the other thing I talked about GABA before. So often if we're feeling anxious before a meeting or whatever it might be or an interaction, our GABA's, you know, not kicking in. And so we might need some L-theanine, which the body converts to GABA, to calm us down. And we actually have L-theanine in tea.
Okay.
So black tea, green tea, oolong tea, those three. Yeah, so there's actually science behind, you know, when people say, well, you know, why don't we have a cup of tea? Like there's a reason there. There's this beautiful nutrient in there that helps calm us down.
Yeah.
It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to make a difference.
For sure.
But you can also, if you go and see like a nutritionist or naturopath, you can actually buy or they can prescribe for you L-theanine. And so you can just take a little tiny bit of that before you're doing like a high school kid. It might be before an exam.
Yeah.
Really good for panic attacks as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of more of a preventative thing because obviously once you're in the middle of a panic attack, like you don't have the headspace to be thinking about, oh, what are my go-to tools here? Because your body is really in fight or flight mode.
Yeah. For sure.
And just on that, if I'm okay to talk about fight or flight.
Go for it.
I guess our body has these kind of two main states, which is rest and digest and fight or flight.
Yeah.
So obviously we want to spend most of our lives in rest and digest.
Yeah.
But we do have the fight or flight response there for a reason.
Okay.
So, again, in Cape people times, it's because we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever it might be. But what's interesting about the body is that it doesn't differentiate between so that stress response, it's in a part of the brain called the amygdala. And so the amygdala kicks in whether it's a physical threat or a psychological threat.
Yeah.
So we might have the same response to being chased by a saber-toothed tiger as we would by being bullied at work.
Okay.
Yeah. So elevated heart rate, rapid shallow breathing, we might sweat. It might start to look like a little bit like a panic attack. We might get that tightness of chest, almost, in extreme cases, almost starting to sound like a bit like a heart attack. So you've got to be careful if you're having these symptoms. You should always go and get checked out by your GP. Like, hey, this is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Always go and check in with your GP. But so we have these physical responses that can be incredibly frightening and can be really distracting. Because the other thing that happens is the blood flow in the body changes. So the blood flow goes to our heart and our muscles, so that we can run faster away from that saber-toothed tiger. Yeah. And also we're releasing like adrenaline, we're releasing cortisol, we're releasing like lots of things to make be able to make quick decisions. But what happens is that the blood flow is directed away from things that the body considers to be not essential in that fear, in that sort of crisis moment.
Yeah.
So away from the digestive system.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon if people are very, very stressed to have digestive disorders. It's one of the most common sort of symptoms of something like anxiety. It also gets diverted away from things like our reproductive organs. So that's why stress is really bad for things like conception. So using those techniques that I talked about before, like the breathing, or taking the L-theanine or taking the magnesium, can bring us out of that fight or flight state and back into rest and digest.
Okay.
Yeah. And the more that we practice doing these things, the better we get at them. So things like exercise, if you think about when you exercise, your heart rate increases.
Yeah.
You sweat. Your breathing becomes faster, which looks very similar to, when we're feeling stressed. So when we exercise, the anxiety-prone person can actually start to recognize that those symptoms can be safe. So the symptoms of the elevated heart rate and what have you can be safe because that's how I feel when I exercise.
Yeah.
So that's one of the many reasons that exercise can be so fantastic for mental health. It also increases or helps sort of stimulate the production of serotonin, our happy hormone.
Okay, so there's a lot of chemistry behind a lot of this is what I'm realizing.
Yeah, and you're not a big fan of chemistry.
Not at all, but it makes sense when you explain it in that way, especially when you use like analogy with like cave people, running away from saber-toothed tigers. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess getting back to like nutrients, like the two for me, there's a few key nutrients. Magnesium is really, really important. So yes, we can take magnesium, but it's also in like nuts and seeds and leafy greens. Zinc is really, really important. It's a common deficiency. If you've got little white spots on your fingernails, you possibly got a zinc deficiency. If you get that little thing where your eyelid just kind of twitches, it flutters.
Yeah.
That's because we need zinc to move, like for the muscles to move from contraction into relaxation and vice versa.
Okay.
And it kind of gets stuck in the middle. So it's neither relaxing nor contracting.
Yeah.
So if that ever happens to me, I'm like, ooh, I'm low on zinc. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know that. Yeah. That happens to me sometimes. I'm like, oh, why is that happening? Yeah.
So zinc's a really big one. Oysters are a really, really good form really high in zinc. As are sort of meats and again, like nuts and seeds. And then the other one that's hugely important is B6. So it's an integral component of, or ingredient rather, of those neurotransmitters that I talked about before. And so sources of B6, the main one's bananas,
Yeah.
which is why I mentioned bananas before. I do love them as a food. And also things like pumpkin seeds are really high in B6 as well. Yeah, so
Amazing.
they're a really good snack. Put them on top of your, if you can find a healthy cereal or make your own, have them on top of a salad. Some people like to toast them up and have them in a little jar and pop them on top of the salad to increase the amount of protein that you have in your salad. Yeah.
Amazing. There's so many little tips and tricks you've given us. So thank you for sharing that. I'd love to jump into our practices and experiment debrief section. So I'm just going to ask you about your way of doing all of this. So is there a practice that you would recommend that to deal with malnutrition that you might use?
So most nutritionists and naturopaths will start with the gut.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic place to start, but depending, on the person, I might start with energy, because if somebody is so completely exhausted that they're sort of not really functioning, then a dietary sort of overhaul, as sort of slow and progressive and paced as it might be, is potentially going to be too much for them if they just kind of don't have the energy to even mentally get themselves to the supermarket or order the things that they need.
Yeah.
So I sometimes will actually start with energy. It's not like the recommended protocol, but if you can't get out of bed because you're so bloody tired, then so I might actually start with some quick fixes like some spirulina.
Okay.
If you're allergic to iodine, don't go there. So I might start with some spirulina, or I might start with like a B5 supplement that's got some herbs and stuff in it that are really good for the adrenal glands to get them kicking in, to give them that energy.
Yeah.
So once this sort of got to that point of, okay, I can kind of function now, then we'll go in and start making some dietary changes.
Okay.
And so then we'll start with the gut. So it's like, okay, how do we minimize sugar? Because those little bacteria that I talked about before love sugar. Yeah. So do cancer cells, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. So those little bacteria there, they love sugar and they have a very loud voice. So they're constantly like knocking, feed me, feed me, feed me. So trying to minimize the sugar and replace it with other things, or even like replace it with low sugar options. And there's some really good ones around now, like even things like tomato sauce. Like, you can buy low sugar tomato sauce, in a couple of different brands. So really starting to look on the back of the packaging. Don't look at the serving, like how much sugar per serve. Look at how much sugar per 100 mils, because by law, everything's required to state the sugar content. And so I'll always look and go, okay, this tomato sauce has this much sugar, this tomato sauce has this much sugar, that's my better option. So you're always comparing like with like, and you start to get a feel for this muesli bar, which we were talking about before.
Yeah.
This muesli bar has 27% sugar and this muesli bar has 11% sugar. Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of what's a better option for me.
Yeah.
So trying to minimize sugar to make sure that we're not feeding that bad bacteria in our gut and causing inflammation in the body. Because remember, like inflammation in the body, it's not just the body, it's the brain.
Yeah.
So inflammation in the brain, we know it impairs our memory. We have cognition issues. It can, also lead to things like, Alzheimer's and, and also increase our risk of anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
So, so then really starting to feed the gut. So, either with something like some fermented foods, and we might throw in a good quality probiotic in there as well.
Yeah.
Remember, there's lots of different strains of bacteria in the gut. So we want to, if we're taking a probiotic, we want to actually, every time we run out, we actually potentially want to mix it up and go with a different one.
Okay.
Because they all have different profiles. So, this one might have, lactobacillus rhamnosus, and the next one might have plantarum or whatever it is. So mixing it up is a really good thing. So that's the second thing that I would be doing, and then starting to incorporate some fiber in the diet. So like what can we replace at meal times? How can we maybe take out some of those highly processed carbohydrates that is, that we all know are not great for us, and maybe replace them with some more fiber. So, I might say to somebody, if you're having, I don't know, like a spaghetti bolognese that's got lots of vegetables in it, can you dial down the pasta a little bit each time, and can you dial up the bolognese part, making sure that there's lots of different vegetables in it? So that's what I would do. But I now make my own cereal because it's hard to find cereals that are low in sugar. It's getting better. And mine is like just a mix of nuts and seeds and chia seeds and flax seeds and Brazil nuts and what have you. And I also make my own bread. So, yep.
What would you say are some of the challenges when it comes to keeping up these good habits that you have?
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's for everybody, you know. So, finding the time, I think is the thing that people will struggle with most. So if somebody comes to me and wants to like kind of overhaul their eating and to improve their mental health, I want to know, what does their day look like? Mm-hmm. Like, do they have to be in the office at 5 o'clock in the morning? Like, it's probably not realistic for them than to, you know, have some scrambled eggs with like mushrooms and, you know, and baby spinach at 4 o'clock in the morning. They probably don't feel like eating like that. Mm-hmm. You know, like if they're a tradie, like they're on the road all day, they might not have they're unlikely to have kind of a refrigeration in their truck or their van or whatever they're driving around. And so they only have access to kind of whatever they can get on the run. So I like to figure out what their day looks like and what they have access to so that when we, because like a lot of healthy eating, my best friend says this to me all the time when I talk to her about it. She's like, it's logistics. And I'm like, yeah, it is logistics. Healthy eating is often about logistics. So logistically, what will work for you? So please remind me of the question.
That's okay. What are the challenges?
Oh, the challenges. So logistics are the challenges. So figuring out, you know, if you're in an office, you've probably got access to a fridge. So, you know, you might be able to do some meal prep on a Sunday, and make yourself sort of a salad that's going to last you a couple of days in the office. So like that's sort of, I would say, relatively easy. But what I would be doing on a Sunday is I would be like boiling up half a dozen eggs. Okay. So that I can have them, I'll just have them sitting in the fridge or have them sitting in the fridge at work. And then I might bring in my fresh salad each day and then I can just pop my egg on top and like that's done. So having as much stuff as possible like at your office or a jar of nuts so that when you're hungry you can snack on the nuts rather than, you know, going out to the vending machine and buying a chocolate bar. Yeah. Bringing in a week's worth of fruit rather than a day's worth of fruit, as long as there's no fruit flies at the office. Yeah. For example, I work from home. So for me, you can do this if you're in an office, but, you know, like I'm looking at what did we have for dinner last night? Is that going to work for lunch today? So we overcook most nights. And then my boys have to clean up from dinner each night. And I have to say, they are very good at it. I wouldn't say it's enthusiastic, but they know that they have to do it. And they do a pretty good job. So, but part of that process is they're actually packing up their lunch for the next day, which is whatever's, you know, is often leftovers from whatever we had because we eat quite well. Yeah. And so that's, again, so logistically, that's what works for us. I'm a big I'm a big fan of smoothies. So for some people, like prepping some of that the night before, and having sitting in the fridge, and in the morning they'll just like, and then they might drink it on the way to work. Okay. Yeah. You know, ideally we want to be eating mindfully, but it's not always practical. Like if you're a tradie, like, I mean, I guess, you know, you can pull over somewhere and try and find somewhere nice to eat. We definitely don't want to be eating in front of the news because if we're watching something stressful on television, you know, like a natural disaster or something, that's stressful. That's releasing stress hormones. It's diverting our blood flow away from our digestive system to other parts of our body. And so we're not going to digest that very well. Yeah. Our body's really going to struggle to do that.
So would you recommend like eating and watching TV, is that like okay, or is there like some sort of link between that?
Do you want to know what we do in practice or what I would recommend?
What you would recommend?
I'm still going to tell you what I do in practice. We developed a bit of a bad habit during COVID, so we don't do it every night, but we do as a family. We're watching That 70s Show at the moment, and so we do sometimes. You know, we might start dinner and have a little bit of a chat, and then like halfway through dinner, we'll put on That 70s Show. Yeah. Which is all right because it's kind of funny. So I guess I rationalise that that's all right. But we do try and eat together as a family.
Yeah.
That's ideal. But if you live on your own, like that's not always practical. So like give yourself a break.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't be watching like a murder mystery, or a horror movie or something like that.
Yeah.
If you are going to eat in front of the TV, think about, is this going to make me feel a little bit stressed? Is this like a nail biter?
Okay.
That is, I'm going to get a little bit agitated, that's what they're designed to do.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be great for your digestion.
Okay. I didn't actually know that there was like a correlation between that, but I do find comfort in food. So I guess if it is a stressful situation that I am watching unfold, I'm going to find comfort in the food that I'm eating.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in terms of barriers, like we just want to make sure that we're planning ahead. So like, have I got fruit in the fruit bowl? Have I got vegetables in the fridge? Have I got backup vegetables in the freezer if I get stuck? And so, there's online shopping. There's lots of different ways around that, but just kind of thinking a little bit ahead. Like what my routine is, I have a fruit and veg service that's on a Tuesday. So making sure that on the weekend I sort of go in and go, yeah, this is what I need. So it's a little bit of organisation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but also, like if you've got kids especially, just, don't just cook one meal. You're in the kitchen, you're making a mess anyway. If you're cooking like a stew or like a big salad or whatever it might be, like make double, make triple, like freeze it if you can. Don't keep on going back into the kitchen every night if you don't love it and you don't have to. If you can make a triple spag bowl or whatever it might be, like, please do that. Save yourself some time so that you've always got that healthy option in the freezer rather than going, oh, I can't be bothered, so I think I'm just going to order, pizza or, Thai, which is really sweet.
Yeah.
Very high in sugar.
Yeah.
Yummy.
So delicious.
So delicious.
Yeah.
But very high in sugar.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a little bit of planning there.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I feel like if you are someone that is pressed for time, finding ways to save time can help you have better eating habits.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Amazing. And how do you
Can I just actually make one more comment?
Go for it.
If you've got really little kids, like your 1-year-old, should be hopefully eating not super dissimilar to what you're eating. So, like when the kids were little, we sort of realized pretty quickly that if we made if we have a chicken roast and we roasted some pumpkin, then we could just kind of, make sure it was soft enough, and then it was done. So it wasn't, we never kind of wanted to be in a situation where you don't want to be in a situation where you're making multiple meals for different people in the family. I know some families have to do that for, whatever reason. They might have a kid that's on the spectrum that's very, very fussy, or they might have a kid that has specific nutritional needs. But if you can try and get everybody eating together as a family and eating the same food, it will save so much time and energy and angst.
Okay. Yeah, amazing. And have you found that this has really improved your resilience or like perspective in life a lot by having these habits?
Yeah, so I find I'm definitely in a much better place when I'm eating well. I always struggle a little bit after Easter. The sugar creeps back in, and I can feel it impacting my mental health.
Okay.
Yeah. So I try and without being obsessive about it. We don't like to be obsessive about food, just don't make it too complicated and too strict. But yeah, having those techniques has really helped me. Like I always know at lunchtime, even if I've only got like 20 minutes between clients or whatever it might be, there's always a boiled egg in the fridge. So I can always whip up a salad. Yeah.
Okay. So that's really great. You're really setting yourself up to do well for you.
Yeah, and make it easy. And because it's easy, it's like there's less of a temptation to turn to something that is sort of quick and nasty. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing those little tips and tricks with us. I'd love to move into our open mic section now.
Yes.
So you can talk about genuinely anything you'd like to.
Oh, gosh. I guess one of my passions is food counselling. So I talked before about, I was a nutritionist, and then I am a nutritionist. And then I'd have these clients that would come in that would have these sort of emotional issues. And I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so that's why I trained as a counsellor, and I bring the two together. And it's really fascinating because, you'll have somebody who is like, I eat really well. And then, a couple of times a week, I've just got to go into the pantry and eat a packet of Tim Tams, like a whole packet of Tim Tams. And I don't crave them at any other time of the day, but then somehow, that's what happens to me.
Yeah.
And what I love to do is root around and figure out why, and, they might say, I thought you were just going to tell me to put a Post-it note in the pantry. Don't eat the Tim Tams. I'm like, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Or you'll have somebody who has no problem eating breakfast and dinner, but lunch is a real issue for them. And, they've got really disordered eating around lunch, because disordered eating can be a precursor to eating disorders, which is a whole kind of another kind of kettle of fish.
Yeah.
Or you'll have somebody who really struggles with breakfast and dinner, but they have no problems with lunch.
Okay.
Or they just can't get themselves on a good track. And so when we kind of root around in the problem and the family of origin and their upbringing and what have you, often what you'll find there's something. There is, there's a sense of loss about somebody leaving them. So when their family leaves the house during the day, they need that packet of Tim Tams.
Okay.
Or, they've always been taught to put other people before themselves. And so in that case, it's really hard to look after your own health because you're always thinking about other people. What will they want to eat? What will my partner want to eat? What will my friend want to eat when we go out? Rather than thinking, what does my body need?
Yeah.
What do I need? I need to put myself first. Or I'm too busy doing things for other people. Or it might be, they're bullied at school. It could be that they came from a different background and, all the white kids were sitting there eating their Vegemite sandwiches and they were eating, something that was different. It was probably a whole lot more nutritious than that like crappy white, bread sandwich. And they were given a lot of crap for that. So like the concept of, they never had a great lunchtime experience. So that's carried like with them throughout life. Or they had a crappy home life. So actually lunchtime was fine, but home was bad because of whatever reason, because their family was giving them a hard time at breakfast and dinner constantly. So it's just really always really interesting to kind of root around and figure out what is happening below the surface to help them understand. And what's really interesting about that is with a lot of people, the minute they can unlock that, or we can unlock that together, and go, it's because of X, Y, Z, they immediately have this kind of realization. And for some people, it's like, okay, well, I don't need to eat that packet of Tim Tams anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't need to because I understand why. Or I go into the pantry and I go, wait a minute, what am I doing here? What's this about? I know what this is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to check in with myself and use some strategies to pull myself out of how I'm feeling right now and those memories that I'm having and feeling triggered.
Yeah.
So like those light bulb moments for me are like amazing. They're absolutely amazing. And and you can see that like clients just go like their whole face is like, what? Oh my God. Like I never thought of that. It just makes so much sense. So I kind of love bringing those two together. And, often people come in and they don't think like the process is going to be what it is. Like they just kind of like, why am I eating crap? And they don't know that we're going to start talking about, their childhood or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But most people trust the process. So that's kind of one of my passions is the two together. And the food counselling, there's so many different things around that because then we can start talking about, okay, well, what are you eating and how can we improve what you're eating for your mental health? But it's also that kind of psychology behind if you're not eating the right thing. Some people it's bad habits, but for some people there's an underlying emotional issue there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And your line of work sounds absolutely fabulous. And I feel like a lot of things do make more sense once you understand the root of it. And it's very hard. Well, I know personally that like it's very hard to go about something if like you don't really know where it's coming from or where you're supposed to go. So I feel like the fact that you give people that clarity is so awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of power for them in terms of, it can be really powerful in terms of them going, I can change what I'm eating because or I can work through what the issue is, and that will help me improve my eating habits and improve my overall mood. Yeah. So it's kind of coming at it from both angles.
Yeah. So we've still got a bit of time left. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I have a recent hobby. Yeah. So my son started rock climbing last year on his birthday. And I was standing there holding the rope going, this is kind of boring. Like, it's cool watching your kid do something, but, like, it's kind of boring. And I'm always saying to people, like, take the opportunity to, like, integrate, like, use your time wisely. And, if you're watching your kid at soccer practice, can you go and do some exercise at the same time? And I was like, well, maybe I should take my own advice, because I don't love exercise. I do it because I need to, and I know it makes me feel good. Yeah. So I was like, well, maybe I could get up on that wall. So I started rock climbing with him, and now we go once a week, and I love it. It's the sense of achievement, like when you do a climb that you think, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this. And my son's like a really good encourager. So he's like, well done, great job. So that's nice. And also it's kind of like where I go, it's level. So it's like 1 to 10. So, like started off at on 2s. Yeah. And just kind of going, hey, like now I can do 3s, and now I can kind of do an overhang, and my body's stronger. Like that feels really good as well. And it's not stronger because I'm going and like lifting weights, which, some people love to do. It kind of doesn't really float my boat. My body's stronger because I'm doing an activity that, like, it's enjoyable. And like the other day I was like hanging, like I was holding my own body weight, which for some people they'll be like, yeah, whatever. But, for me, like, I'm kind of like, I'm sort of little, and physically I'm not like, like I'm not really built. Yeah. And so like I was holding my own body weight going, hey, like check me out. Like I can hold my own body weight. And, so that feels really good. And also like just, my fingers are stronger. And so I had a really big moment this week where I've kind of been building up from like 4s and 5s, and I've been struggling with 5s, and I saw this 6 and I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. And I did it. And then like it was a auto belay. So there's like nobody standing at the bottom holding the rope. It's like an auto rope thing. Oh, awesome. Yeah. So I came down off the auto belay and I kind of lay myself on the ground, and then I was like just literally putting my hands up in the air like this. And then everybody else around was like, oh, how'd you go? And I was like, I just did my first 6. And there's like random people in the climbing gym going, that's so awesome. We love that. Oh. And I love that. It's kind of not showy. Like everybody's just kind of dressed kind of grungy. And so, you don't feel like you have to like wear your really super cool active wear to the climbing gym as well. So I just kind of, I don't know, it's something that I've got into. It's really cool seeing my son develop, but it's also cool being able to like develop myself and feel like, I'm doing something good that's good for my body, but it's kind of good for my brain as well. So yeah.
That's really awesome. I feel like the adrenaline and like the energy and the happiness you get from doing an activity that you really love is so unmatched.
Oh yeah. And like, again, like lots of neurotransmitters released when you do that, like so much dopamine, like the massive dopamine hit when you go, I did that, I completed that, I achieved that. So yeah. So that's my little joy story for the week.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was awesome. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you for joining us again, Penny.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this. So you've been a great host.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been amazing having you here, and it's been my pleasure. So for those of us who want to find out a bit more about you, where can we go?
Oh, okay. Yep, absolutely. Forgot to talk about that. So my company is Mind Mood Food. Yep. So I talk about the mind, I talk about your mood, and I talk about food. So you can visit my website. You can drop me an email at penny@mindmoodfood.com.au, or you'll probably be able to find me on LinkedIn or Facebook as well. So maybe even Instagram. But yeah, so I'm everywhere. But yeah, drop me an email or have a look at my website. I'd love to hear from you.
Beautiful. Well, we also have Penny's details in the description below. But to everyone listening, please don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we'll see you guys next time. You have been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.